weaker party has to accept the reasons of the stronger party. When we adopt a humanitarian dialogue, we are faced by a humanity in approach which actually eliminates interests and gains. We are characterized by mercy, and we do not try to negate the rights of others, but we rather try to convince the other party. Ladies and gentlemen, human justice is present and has been so in the past. The international community has tried hard to propagate the culture of human justice, especially after the principle of the prevalence of the strongest has propagated. However, we are now faced by a very high price to be paid, which is the lives of the innocent. Until today, the corpus of human laws and international humanitarian law, together with international conventions, could not to put a limit to the desecration of human dignity. And this is not due to flaws in these conventions, but due to the fact that the overwhelming majority of those who lead wars do not believe in basic principles. We have to realize that we are all the same, and we have to understand that human dignity does not distinguish between people, and we have to take the interest of humanity as a priority on the basis of the realization that any harm to one party will harm all parties, and any good to one party will bring good to other parties. I have worked as an officer in internal security, and and I have led the security forces for 8 years, and I have witnessed the difficulty in bringing together justice on the one hand and the reality we live on the other. After my experience in the fields of security and justice, I may conclude that whoever thinks that security is a static principle and that justice has no mercy is wrong. If the culture of human dialogue continues to become weaker and weaker among people, we will have a culture of conflict, and violence will become a means to acquire gain and achieve objectives, and societies will be riddled with destructive conflicts, and harmony between people will disappear. Together with this, people will start thinking that the judiciary is no longer a safe haven for people, and the judge will find it hard to find a meeting point between the parties in conflict. Moreover, revenge will prevail. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot deny that there are many perils that humanity has to face due to the painful events that we are witnessing in many places of the world. I will not hide from you that we are on the verge of a very delicate and exceptional phase. Terrorism will affect us all, and it is practiced not only by outlawed organizations, but also by certain parties that refuse dialogue. And in this case, conflict will prevail. The dire prospect we are facing today is a natural result of the lack of the culture of dialogue between people and communication between people. I wish to congratulate you on this excellent initiative adopted by the International Center for Strategic Studies that aims at giving a new push to the culture of dialogue and the solution of conflict by peaceful means. God has created us equal, and He has also encouraged dialogue among us. Let us listen to our Creator, who asks us to let peace prevail in our souls, and let this spirit of humanity be the emblem in all our dealings, so that we may raise a white banner based on tolerance rather than banners of death that actually have innocent people as their victims. We have to call for peace and not for violence. The drums of war are being beaten, and we are like bodies without souls. That is why we have to call for a spirit of humanity that rules our dealings. I wish to thank the International Center for Strategic Studies for all the efforts that led to this conference. Thank you, Dr. Ali Awad, our dear colleague and friend, for all his efforts in enhancing the culture of dialogue. I wish to thank all those who contributed to this event. I salute your countries. I salute the University of Geneva and Switzerland in general, and Geneva in particular. And may we live in peace and security. And I hope to meet you again soon in such a humanitarian context. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister, for very thoughtful considerations on the importance of human rights, justice as a safe haven, and that we should all hold banners for tolerance and not for death fully. Thank you so much for it. And now shall I ask General Ali Awad for his intervention?
الحضور الكريم.
Dear participants, or each conference or each participation contribution aims at relaying scientific messages. The first message I wish to relay is how do the media instigate the general public to violence, and how is the national dialogue influenced by violence? Instigating to violence separates between people, and there's a scientific theory that speaks about this. The individual within a group sometimes, and not always, and not most of the times, but sometimes, may be transformed into an individual that cannot see anything but his own personal interest. And this is a sort of voluntary suicide. It is true that we have mass suicides that are instigated by the mass media, but we also have this type of suicide. The individual in such a case, the individual usually sees things in a general matter and is not influenced by the details. And violence is contagious. And we also have the fact that violence is unjustifiable, and it is difficult to identify it. And we cannot, in this case, an individual actually becomes or rejects those who are different. Of course, teenagers are the first victims of mass media instigation, and of course, a dialogue in that case is impossible. We realized that the war in Lebanon was actually saw the participation of the teenagers. The mass media definitely influence the masses, and all morality is deformed, and moral values are deformed. I'm speaking now about our collective memory and how it is influenced by the mass media. The masses are influenced by all sorts of cultural heritage issues, including history and myths and traditions and other. Today, we will see how conflicts are driven towards extremism, because when the individuals are influenced by the collective memory. The danger lies in the fact that propaganda creators aim at this, and when the most reasonable parties try to resort to dialogue, the mass media may come into this and try to propagate ideas of extremism, which leads to succession of wars and conflicts in one country. Why has dialogue been aborted time after time in countries that suffer from internal tensions? The answer is very simple: because the mass media instigated the people to resort to violence, and this is indirect influence, but it is also leads to successive periods of violence that undermine all types of dialogue and lead to what we may call the equation of balance of killings, of murders, because the public opinion in that country has been instigated to violence. And any society with different components is subject to this, and only through a true sense of citizenship can we arrive at the culture of dialogue. Is it possible to have a dialogue and a culture of dialogue without proper education and proper awareness raising in certain issues? Of course not. The mass media instigation to resort to violence are, of course, detrimental to us. And the image of the police forces is extremely important and gives more credibility to the ruling parties or powers. This is why we have to be careful also in how to present such images. Any extremism leads to a plurality that is manipulated. And we may find ourselves in the presence of several societies within one society. How is it? What happens to national dialogue when we have a mass media that instigates to violence? In some cases we have witnessed, I'm speaking about a theory, a scientific theory with no political considerations. If we have an irrational polemic on how to build a system, this is due to a lack of a culture of dialogue. There is a violent personality that is not balanced, that negates the existence of the other, that resorts to violence and not to dialogue, and it resorts to violence directly. So how may we speak of a dialogue within one society that does not have a personality based on dialogue? The lack of dialogue in any political crisis leads to a conflict, despite the will between the will of the people, because there is lack of a culture of dialogue and each party fears the other. It doesn't depend on the part of the world we come from, whether it is the first, the second, or the third world. We have to insist on the importance of two elements, citizenship and security. In May 2012, there was a workshop that was held in Sanremo in the International Institute for Human Law, and I'm a member of that institute. In my presentation, I said that the first challenge that international legitimacy has to face lies in pushing the parties in conflict towards dialogue, so as not to reach a phase when one party wants to cancel the other, which would lead in turn to prolonged conflicts. And I was right. Unfortunately, we are now in a phase where such conflicts are being prolonged. What is more dangerous than all this is that we are sort of used to these images of corpses, of bodies, of suffering in the television. In the past, such images were repellent, were horrible. We were horrified by such images. Now we watch the TV and see such suffering while we're eating ice cream, for instance. Durkheim, and what he said in the field of sociology is the following: conflicts by using arms of any type. No, actually, he said that conflicts or fights while using knives, stones, hands are more dangerous than conflicts that resort to the use of weapons and missiles that are fired from a distance. We are now approaching human disasters. Common living together and coexistence is an essential part of our social contract. The instigation of mass media that resorts to a sort of coverage of holiness has led and will lead to the creation of a non-humane personality full of the culture of violence and full of hatred, which will lead to us to finding it very difficult to reach dialogue, if not impossible to do so. Hatred is being implanted within our souls. This is why we have to commit ourselves to the adoption of a political and media discourse that is far away from any such instigation to violence and extremism. Such an instigation to violence and extremism is a media crime. We have the right to live a life without repression or hegemony, which are a type of psychological violence that is much more dangerous than any material violence. We must not resort to media instigation to violence as a means of policy making. Even insults within a political context is a form of violence and leads to extremism. The mass media have to refrain from using instigation to violence in the name of religion and not to bring out examples from the past in order to instigate into violence. We must refrain from media instigation to violence so as not to close the doors to humanitarian dialogue. This is what I wanted to say to you in the framework, with a scientific approach, and basically on the importance of humanitarian dialogue. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, General Ali Awad. I was moved this morning by your recollections of your personal, dramatic sufferings of your own family. But I was also very touched now by your passionate words about the influence of mass media, your analysis on the effect that it has on teenagers and young people, and how this leads to violence. But he also dwelt upon the actions to be taken in order to prevent or try and reduce the risks of such developments. Thank you very much indeed for your considerations. And now I would like to give the floor to Professor Giorgio Pacifici.
Thank you. Et bonsoir, messieurs. Mesdames, autorités. Je parle en français, mais vous aurez la traduction, parce que j'ai donné mon texte au traducteur. Dans les 20 dernières années, certains facteurs géopolitiques mondiaux ont profondément modifié les relations entre les nations, les communautés et les grands groupes sociaux. Et pour cela, ils ont aussi changé la nature des dialogues humanitaires. Comme sociologue intéressé par des phénomènes de transformation et de changement, je dois noter que, à l'origine du dialogue humanitaire, il y a toujours eu des guerres, des génocides, des famines, des catastrophes naturelles, des épidémies. Ces choses terribles existent depuis toujours. Mais maintenant, on fait l'apparition des autres manifestations du mal. Le terrorisme, l'intolérance, la corruption, des nouvelles formes d'esclavage, l'entrelacement des puissantes organisations criminelles. Ces nouvelles manifestations du mal, comme je l'écrivais dans un livre récent dont je suis le curateur, ont transformé la nature même du dialogue en vue de rendre plus difficile le dialogue et plus complexe. Le livre est Les maschere del male, una sociologia. C'est tout récent. Malheureusement, je ne peux pas vous donner la copie, mais a été publié récemment. J'ai appelé ces facteurs globaux car ils ne peuvent pas être analysés dans le contexte d'un seul pays ou d'une zone géographique spécifique. Il suffit de consulter les statistiques d'une organisation comme Transparency International pour réaliser qu'un mal comme la corruption, qui a fortement impacté le phénomène humanitaire, est propagé à toutes les régions du monde. Je suis sûr que ce serait intéressant d'analyser un par un ces nouveaux facteurs géopolitiques mondiaux. Mais les temps limités disponibles nécessitent de ne considérer que les facteurs sociaux non directement liés au mal. Je pense que, avant de parler de ces facteurs sociaux dans le dialogue humanitaire, il est nécessaire de donner une définition de facteurs sociaux et des acteurs sociaux opérant sur la scène internationale. Dans ce contexte, nous considérons comme des facteurs sociaux non seulement les attitudes sociales consolidées, mais aussi les faits historiques et les préjugés qui peuvent influer sur les dialogues. Et nous définissons comme acteurs sociaux tous ceux qui participent, quoique de manière différente, au dialogue social. Comme chacun